All right, so welcome all today. Good afternoon. We're here with the Office of Senator Menendez for this virtual conversation. As you know, Senator Menendez is our senator from New Jersey, and he's proudly the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. And our topic today is the passage of the United States-Ecuador Partnership Act of 2022. Buenas tardes, los saludamos aquí con la oficina del senador Menéndez y nos gustaría agradecerles por unirse a esta conversación virtual. El senador Menéndez, su senador de New Jersey, es el presidente del Comité de Relaciones Exteriores y el tópico hoy es la aprobación de la Ley de Asociación entre Estados Unidos y Ecuador del 2022. Senador Menéndez, usted tiene la palabra para la bienvenida. Senator Menéndez is going to provide opening remarks and I welcome now.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias, Carlos. Bienvenidos a todos. Buenas tardes. Gracias por unirse con nosotros por este forum virtual. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your attendance in our virtual forum here. Let me start off by saying that I'm proud to share that on December 15th, the U.S. Congress approved my United States-Ecuador Partnership Act as part of the annual defense authorization bill. And on December 23rd, President Biden officially signed my legislation into law. This marks the first time in its history that the Congress has approved legislation solely focused on the relationship between the United States and Ecuador. And it is a testament to the growing partnership between our two countries. And I wanted to share this exciting news with all of you and thank many of you who were very engaged in supporting our effort. Me enorgullece compartir que el mes pasado, en el 15 de diciembre, el Congreso aprobó mi proyecto por la asociación entre los Estados Unidos y Ecuador del 2022 como parte de la legislación anual de la defensa nacional, y el 23 de diciembre el presidente Biden firmó la ley. Es la primera vez en la historia del Congreso que se ha aprobado una legislación solamente enfocada entre la relación de los Estados Unidos y Ecuador, y es un testamento al creciente cooperación que tenemos entre ambos países. This is work that I have done with the Biden, I will be doing with the Biden administration to implement my legislation. And I want to hear from all of you about how we can further strengthen relations between the United States and Ecuador. My unprecedented legislation requires the United States to lay out a strategy to expand economic and commercial ties and to jointly develop new development initiatives that will create the conditions for inclusive economic growth in Ecuador, including for Afro-Ecuadorian and indigenous communities. Digo que esta ley, ahora vamos a trabajar con la administración del presidente Biden en implementar mi legislación, y quiero escuchar de ustedes por este foro y por otras vías también, cómo puedo continuar fortaleciendo las relaciones entre los Estados Unidos y Ecuador. Mi ley, que es sin precedentes en la historia, requiere que los Estados Unidos diseñen una estrategia para expandir los lazos económicos y comerciales y para que juntos podamos establecer nuevas iniciativas de desarrollo que creen las condiciones para el crecimiento inclusivo, incluyendo a las comunidades afroecuatorianas y indígenas. Mi ley requiere que el Departamento de Estado y la Agencia de Desarrollo de los Estados Unidos desarrolle iniciativas que apoyen el liderazgo de Ecuador en la conservación climática y en la lucha contra el cambio climático. Asuntos donde el Ecuador, ha sido un líder. Dado los nuevos desafíos de seguridad que hemos visto en Ecuador y que Ecuador se está enfrentando, mi legislación también requiere que el Departamento de Estado expanda la cooperación para ayudar a Ecuador a enfrentar en desafíos del narcotráfico y las organizaciones criminales transnacionales. Y mi ley autoriza a la guardacosta de los Estados Unidos a transferir 2 barcos para fortalecer los esfuerzos de Ecuador para proteger la reserva marina de las Islas Galápagos, combatir la pesca ilegal, sobre todo de la China, y combatir el narcotráfico. This work requires the State Department and U.S. Agency for International Development to create new initiatives to support Ecuador's leadership on environmental conservation, addressing climate change issues that I would say Ecuador has been a leader on. And given all of the new security challenges that Ecuador has been facing, particularly from gangs and transnational narco trafficking, my legislation will also require the State Department to expand our cooperation to help Ecuador address challenges posed by drug trafficking and transnational criminal organizations. My legislation, the new law, authorizes the U.S. Coast Guard to transfer 2 ships to strengthen Ecuador's efforts to protect the Galapagos Marine Reserve, which the president of Ecuador dramatically expanded to his great distinction, something that is not only, of course, a national patrimony for Ecuador, but of international significance, and to counter illegal fishing by China and to address drug trafficking. At the end of the year, I was proud to work with President Biden to organize President Lasso's visit to the White House. I wanted to make sure that we showed that the United States stands with those who share our values, who are in the forefront of promoting democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, and who are also fighting for and creating environmental stewardship, as President Lasso has. And I also personally hosted President Lasso for a meeting with Democratic and Republican senators in the U.S. Capitol in the Senate Foreign Relations Historic Meeting Room. We had lengthy discussions about how we can further strengthen the relationship between the United States and Ecuador. And I also issued a public statement in support of the United States and Ecuador opening negotiations on a free trade agreement, as long as that agreement meets the high standards that Congress approved in the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, including strong enforcement mechanisms on labor and environmental standards. So with that said, I look forward to hearing from all of you how we can further strengthen the ties between the United States and Ecuador. I welcome not just today, but along the way, your comments, proposals, and concerns. Let me just say que al final del año me enorgullece trabajar con el presidente Biden para organizar la visita del presidente Lasso a la Casa Blanca. Quería estar seguro que mandamos un mensaje en este hemisferio y en otras partes del mundo. Cuando promueves la democracia, el respeto a los derechos humanos, las reglas de la ley, cuando eres un líder en el tema ambiental, pues entonces merece una visita con el presidente de los Estados Unidos. Y personalmente, después de eso, recibí al presidente Lasso para una reunión con senadores republicanos y demócratas del Comité de Relación Exterior del Senado en el Capitolio, en la histórica sala de reunión que tenemos. Tuvimos una larga charla sobre cómo podemos ayudar a fortalecer aún más la relación entre los Estados Unidos y Ecuador. Y también emití un pronunciamiento público en apoyo a la apertura de las negociaciones para que un acuerdo de libre comercio, siempre cuando se mantengan los altos estándares que el Congreso aprobó entre los Estados Unidos, México y Canadá, se puedan realizar. Y con lo dicho, estoy listo para escuchar de todos ustedes acerca de cómo podemos ayudar a fortalecer aún más los vehículos entre los Estados Unidos y Ecuador. Invitamos no solamente hoy, pero en los días adelante a nuestra oficina, por nuestros ayudantes y lo demás, sus comentarios, sus propuestas y sus preocupaciones. With that, Carlos, I think I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Senator Menendez, for those inspiring remarks and for your hard work in the hemisphere. It's really inspiring. We're going to turn to questions now. Le agradecemos al senador Menéndez por esos mensajes introductorios, esas palabras, y nos inspira su trabajo que dura en el hemisferio occidental. Vamos a empezar ahora con nuestra primera pregunta de Hugo Almeida. Hugo es el CEO de Arbitronics, tiene muchísima experiencia ejecutiva. Hugo, por favor, pregunta número 1. We're going to start with Hugo Almeida. Hugo Almeida is the CEO of Arbitronics, and he's going to ask question 1. He has extensive entrepreneurial experience. Hugo.
Thank you, Carlos, for the invitation and the coordination. It's very much appreciated. Buenas tardes, Senator Menendez. Thank you for taking the time to share with us all more details on the Partnership Act. It's a pleasure once again to have this opportunity to speak with you. Senator Menendez, as an Ecuadorian entrepreneur who has played an important part as a key provider of technology to some of the largest service providers in Ecuador for the past 30 years, I'm greatly interested in learning more. My question is, how will the United States Partnership Act proceed to facilitate inclusive economic growth? And is the plan to support Afro-Ecuadorian and indigenous communities by dropping import duties or having a department within the U.S. that can assist entrepreneurs promote and grow their products? And finally, will there be incentives? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Hugo, for your question. Let me say, I call it legislation, it's now the law. The law requires the State Department and the Treasury Department and the U.S. Trade Representative to develop and implement a joint strategy to help Ecuador create a more open and competitive business environment. This measure brings all the tools that the U.S. government has at its disposal to support our partner in Ecuador. This includes technical assistance, trade missions for U.S. companies, assistance to speed up customs processing, and helping Ecuador in its digital transformation. And as part of that effort, we want to ensure that the U.S. government is helping American and Ecuadorian businesses build closer ties. And we want to ensure that these efforts benefit all of our citizens, which will include consultations with groups that, to be very honest with you, have traditionally been left out of the economy, including Afro-Ecuadorian and indigenous groups. We all benefit when all of our citizens benefit from economic growth and development. And certainly, we have, as we aspire to a free trade agreement with Ecuador, we are looking at GPS preferences and making sure that there are some things we can do upfront without waiting for a free trade agreement to be executed and passed by the Senate to enhance the economic opportunities for both of our countries and for the entrepreneurial class of both of our countries.
Thank you for that answer, Senator Menendez. We're going to now proceed with our question 2. Vladimir Quito. Vladimir, we're going to unmute you. Vladimir, Senator, he is a community civic leader. He created Juventud Ecuatoriana, and he's an entrepreneur too, and the co-founder of Kinty Doc. Vladimir, please, question number 2 for our Senator. Vladimir va a preguntar, es la pregunta número 2. Por favor, Vladimir.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Senator, for the opportunity and for taking the leadership and strengthening the relations between the U.S. and Ecuador. My question is the following. We have a new wave of immigrants arriving in New Jersey from Ecuador, but this wave is mostly young professionals. Is there any mechanism by this act that will facilitate the labor insertion of these professionals who are undocumented? Thank you.
Well, Vladimir, thank you for the question. I wish that we could have included such provisions in the legislation, but this legislation does not include provisions on immigration or work authorizations. However, I hope you know that those issues broadly, beyond even the Ecuadorian community, are a priority for me. It is something that we are working in the Congress, which will be more difficult, to be very honest with you, than even that it has been before, especially when we see some of the realities of the new House leadership as to immigration-related questions, but we're not going to let that deter us. And so I am looking forward to trying to find spaces where we can make some of this happen. But the law itself does not speak to this.
Thank you, Senator, for that answer, and thank you, Vladimir, for that question. We're gonna go now to Omar Crespo. Brian, he said he raised his hand. If you can identify him on the attendees list, he just raised his hand, Omar Crespo. If not, we are gonna ask the question on behalf of Omar, just to make sure we speed up. Brian, we don't have him? No. So I'll ask on Omar's behalf. Omar, Senator, is a young and successful tech leader here in the state of New Jersey of Ecuadorian origin. Omar Crespo asks, how can U.S. companies support cybersecurity initiatives for Ecuador and or the U.S. government that benefit both countries? And importantly also, Omar Crespo asks, also does the law contemplate collaboration on combating transnational misinformation that poisons the democratic processes here and abroad? Thank you, Omar, for that question.
Well, that is a great question. That is a great question. In many ways, it transcends Ecuador, but certainly it is also about Ecuador. In recent years, the United States government has heard from our partners around the world about their concerns about rising cyber attacks and cyber crime and the vulnerability of their institutions and critical infrastructure. Hemos escuchado de muchos países, y los gobiernos de muchos países, sobre los ataques cibernéticos, tanto contra la infraestructura de ese país, los crímenes cibernéticos y las instituciones que tienen vulnerabilidad porque no tienen la mejor tecnología disponible. The State Department, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Defense Department have developed new tools to help our partners address cyber attacks and cyber crimes. My legislation, the law, will require these departments to develop new initiatives to support Ecuador's efforts. Nuestra ley propone que el Departamento de Estado, el Departamento de Seguridad Nacional, el Departamento de Defensa, ayuda a Ecuador para poder tener un sistema cibernético de defensa tecnológica al nivel más eficiente y más recién que existe en nuestro propio país. And also the issue of disinformation and misinformation will be addressed as part of this effort. I'm deeply, deeply concerned about foreign disinformation and misinformation efforts on US democracy, but also democracies around the world. All of us know that Spanish language disinformation circulated abroad also circulates in our communities in the United States. And this is a challenge, excuse me, a growing challenge that we have to address. El tema de la desinformación y la mala información va a ser parte de este esfuerzo. Una de las inquietudes grandes que yo tengo como el presidente del Comité de Relaciones Exteriores es la desinformación y la mala información que a propósito se está distribuyendo por países ajenos que actualmente quiere afectuar la democracia en estos países, que quiere afectuar la opinión del público en una forma negativa con el propósito de crear inquietud social. Y esto tenemos que ayudar a Ecuador, tener la habilidad de contrarrestar, pero también tenemos que hacerlo globalmente. Y en este hemisferio donde vemos la desinformación en los canales y las redes en español son más crecientes, aún más que dentro de las redes y las fuentes de información en inglés. Así que va a ser parte de nuestra tarea.
Gracias, senador. Esa respuesta tan profunda, un tópico tan preocupante para nuestra comunidad. Next question. It's María Andrade. María Andrade It's a community and educational leader here in the state. Maria, please proceed asking your question.
Presente. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Senator. Thank you for providing the space to be able to educate our community. Thank you for the advocacy on behalf of Ecuadorian Americans here in New Jersey and all over the United States. This act represents so much for our community at large here and back home. I want to extend a token of gratitude for your advocacy, for your hard work, and we look forward to all the things this act will accomplish. I will move forward with my question. Galapagos is a natural sanctuary. It is facing illegal fishing from Chinese commercial fleets. What is going to be the role of the US government to support this sanctuary? And how can diaspora communities help efforts for transnational environmental conservation? Thank you.
Well, that's a great question, Maria, one of the challenges of our time. I had the chance to visit the Galapagos in October. Ecuador has been a leader in protecting this treasure for the entire world. And I was very supportive when President Lasso decided to double the size of the Galapagos Marine Reserve last year. I also had the chance to meet with the Ecuadorian Navy, with local prosecutors and environmental organizations to hear about the threat that is posed by illegal fishing by Chinese ships, most particularly in the sea. And that's why I included an entire section in my law focused on supporting Ecuador's conservation efforts, both in the Galapagos and, by the way, also the Amazon. And that is why my legislation, as I mentioned earlier, authorizes the United States Coast Guard to transfer 2 critical ships to the Ecuadorian government to help increase efforts to prevent illegal fishing. Now, I would be happy to have my office put you in contact with the Ecuadorian Embassy in Washington, or the US Embassy in Quito, and organizations in the Galapagos to help you get more involved in protecting this environmental treasure, but raising our voices as a whole, both in our government, so our government is responsive, but also in international organizations is incredibly important. Yo tuve la oportunidad de visitar los Galápagos en octubre. Ecuador ha sido un líder en proteger este tesoro para el mundo entero. Apoyé el presidente Lasso cuando decidió de doblar la Reserva Marina de los Galápagos el año pasado. Tuve una oportunidad cuando yo estaba en Ecuador de reunirme con el Esfuerzo Naval de Ecuador, los procuradores, las organizaciones medioambientales, para oír de la amenaza, sobre todo de la pesca ilegal de China y de sus barcos en la zona. Por eso incluí una sección en mi ley que apoya los esfuerzos de conservación de Ecuador en los Galápagos y también en la Amazonia. Por eso estamos transfiriendo 2 barcos de la guardacosta de los Estados Unidos a Ecuador para que puedan combatir la pesca ilegal, y estamos muy dispuestos de poner cualquiera de los miembros de la comunidad que están interesados en estos temas medioambientales con los anfitriones internacionalmente y en Ecuador y aquí en los Estados Unidos para seguir este movimiento.
Thank you, Senator, for that answer to that environmental question. And we're going to go with Giovanna Aguilar. Giovanna Aguilar, it's an arts leader associated with the Ecuadorian Film Festival, and she's also an entrepreneur. And this is also an environmental question. Giovanna, please proceed to ask your question. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, Senator, and thank you, Carlos. I want to first of all thank you for the support that you gave the Ecuadorian Film Festival in November. It came to New Jersey for the first time. So
that's great.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud that you are leading the US in relationships with Ecuador, where I have a lot of family ties, and also like some of the folks who've spoken also have entrepreneurial aspirations and connections there. So my question is, though, regarding on the environmental side, and you kind of answered already with Maria, but how do you think the this now US-Ecuadorian Partnership Act can help further prevent the drilling of the oil, especially in Yasuni, which is now, I think, back on the table, from what I understand. And because, as you know, Yasuni is probably one of the most biodiverse areas in the world. And what can we do as people here, like myself, Ecuadorian Americans?
Well, thank you very much for your question. My law requires the U.S. Agency for International Development and the State Department to provide technical assistance to Ecuador's environmental ministry to help with conservation in Ecuador's national parks and its protected forests. It ensures that one of the things that I think is very important, that U.S. efforts directly consult with communities living near protected natural areas, and it provides assistance to Ecuador in preparing for and responding to natural disasters. Now, part of what the State Department will do is in its advocacy and engagement, as well as USAID, our development agency, will work with Ecuador to continue to build upon its environmental stewardship and to find development opportunities that do not depend upon the type of issue you raised with the oil and the Yasuni. And so that's something that I look forward to us being able to help Ecuador. They have a sovereign right to make their decisions, but to ultimately urge them to move in the direction they've generally taken, which is as an environmental leader. But sometimes economic pressures can make you think on certain things a different way. We want to make sure that doesn't take place. As it relates to your engagement, let me just say that there are a series of U.S. NGOs that are very much engaged both in Ecuador and with Ecuador on many of these issues. The Darwin Foundation is one of them, particularly in the Galapagos, but some of the ocean advocacy groups certainly would be part of that. And so I will have, for those of you who are interested in finding ways as part of the diaspora and as citizens of the United States who care about these environmental questions, to be able to engage, I will have Carlos in our office provide you with all the contact lists that I would urge you to consider engaging in, because I think that may be the most powerful way to ultimately reach the goals that we collectively have.
Thank you, Senator. I'm just going to say to all the audience, we are very, very grateful for your attendance. On short notice, we have more than 150 registrants. I see that there are 22 more questions for the Senator, which I see shows the level of engagement for the historic chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee and how I think New Jersey cares about the Western Hemisphere connection. As the Senator said, his staffers will be in touch with you. We will take care of every single one of those questions with my colleagues in Washington, Brandon Jodar and Charles Orta, who we work very closely with. And we just want to pass it over to our Senator for closing remarks. We have to end it because the Senator has an engagement after, but this will not be the last time we'll be talking to you. Senator, closing remarks for your audience, please.
Well, first of all, I want to say to those 22, and for that fact, everybody else who may have a question or a comment, to definitely, well, let's make sure we get their questions, Carlos, and that we respond to them outside of this live forum, so we can have people's interests and concerns responded to, or ideas be thought about and when possible implemented. I think that's incredibly important. It's part of what we want to do, to create some thought processes and the sharing of ideas through this webinar. So that's very important. I want to make sure we respond to everybody. So I'm sure that your questions should be forwarded to Carlos if we don't have them already. And this is a continuing engagement. This is not just, we had this one moment. We're celebrating, of course, the passage of the law. Now we have to work collectively towards its successful implementation, which I fully intend to do. But we invite all of you to continue to be part of the journey. Simplemente quiero decir, le agradezco a todos que se han reunido en este foro virtual Obviamente, cualquier foro tiene limitaciones en tiempo. Sé que hay otras preguntas que nos han hecho o sugerencias que se han ofrecido y quiero que todo eso se vaya a ser parte de lo que estamos tratando de lograr hoy. Así que a eso que tienen preguntas, Carlos va a acumularlo y vamos a contestarle. A eso que tienen sugerencias, vamos a considerarlo. Esto es no solamente un plazo de un momento, pero una continuación de un diálogo con nuestra oficina. Queremos, ahora que hemos tenido la oportunidad de celebrar esta ley que ha pasado, ahora hay que ir a la implementación de la ley y en ese sentido lo ofrecemos todos que continúen con nosotros en esta jornada para tener el éxito más grande posible que todos queremos tener para los Estados Unidos y Ecuador. So thank you very much, and we look forward to working with you and continuing the journey to a lot of success for both of our countries.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.